Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works, Finance, and Safety Committee meeting of Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Albertson? Bueller?
Here.
Hoyer?
Here.
Pauline? Here. Lallam?
Here.
Manti? Rademski?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Billhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda. Oh, Dan. Dan just logged in.
Albertson?
Here.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. I have a motion by Lallam and a second by Bueller. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 4 is the public input time, and this is the time reserved for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. And if you'd like to, please state your name into the microphone for the record before making a comment. If you're online, just say permission to speak.
Did you have a comment, ma'am?
Okay. See no one, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. I have a motion by Roby and a second by Bueller. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 6 is the regular agenda, and A is authorization to bid the fuel farm expansion project at the Watertown Regional Airport. And so look for a motion for that.
So
Second.
Didn't hear, was that Vilhauer? Okay, motion by Vilhauer and a second by Holeen. And I will ask the Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to talk about this.
Thank you, Mayor. I've also got a couple of folks on standby here to help me talk through this. You have to pardon me, I've been out under the weather here lately, so if I have to pass my talking off to some assistants, that'd be the main reason why. That because they might know more about these issues than I might. So, but the fuel farm expansion project, that's been one that's been in the works here for a little while. This has been before the council previously, a few months back, if you recall. And what had happened there is Airport Manager Todd Syrie and myself had been discussing with the airport board and with the council about the need for expanding the fuel farm to meet the fueling needs out at the airport. And we had a plan in place to fund that project this year. And if you remember, we were going to shift some CIP funds in order to do so. And then COVID hit and kind of put the plans on hold. We decided internally that we'd want to wait out some of this COVID pandemic and the impacts that it has on the airline industry, and didn't want to pull the trigger on the project at that time. So we put it on hold here for the last few months. Since that time has passed now, there's been a few things that have happened that have exacerbated the need for this project to actually bring it back to the forefront somewhat urgently. And one of those things is ATY Aviation has recently become a what's called a corporate aircraft association preferred fixed base operator. With that designation, that triggers a lot more air traffic as far as being at an identified location for refueling and things of that nature. And so the fuel farm that's out there today, the capacities just aren't keeping up with the demand now, since we've had this CAA preferred operator designation. With that, we also thought that COVID would slow the fueling down, and because of the commercial airline industry has taken such a hard hit, I think it's an indicator that the private airline industry has picked up, and cause the use of that fuel demand to rise all the more. So it's kind of had an inverse effect is what we thought it might have, the COVID pandemic has. With all that being said, Todd Syre's on the line here. Todd, if you want to expand on anything that I missed, maybe talk about the CARES Act funding to fund this at this point.
Absolutely. Thanks, Heath. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep, coming through clear, Todd.
Thank you. So yeah, we had numerous discussions with the FAA and the state DOT with this project, and along with Helms and Associates has been putting our spec together for next year. We talked to the FAA about expansive traffic that we've been seeing in the recent months here with private jet traffic mainly. Taking a lot of Jet A fuel at one time, making it very, very hard for A2 Aviation to plan out their fuel deliveries. And I believe we have John and Brenda Yost at City Hall there in the council chambers. We can ask them to speak if you would like. But we've been talking to Dave Anderson from the ADO. He's the ADO manager, the Airports District Office that we work with. And he directly stated that we could use the operational costs of the CARES Act to get this project 100% funded. As you recall, that's that $1.13 million we got through the CARES Act here this year earlier, and we opted to use that for operational costs. So with that said, this will not cost the city a dime. We'll have to front end the money, and then we'll get it reimbursed at 100% through the operational costs, as Kristen has been doing a great job of.
Okay, well, and that's a good point, Todd, that we can use the operational money, because I think we chose to go that path with the CARES Act funding. We had some choices, but this will be covered as an operational expense, even though it's kind of more of a capital expense. You verified that?
The FAA deems this as an operational expense.
Okay. Any questions, Council? I see we do have the Yosts in case anyone has any questions for them. Councilman Vilhauer?
Just a comment at the last regular airport board meeting. I know this was very strongly recommended by the airport board, so they definitely want to see us move forward with this.
Yes, and want to congratulate Yost for the certification. That's very beneficial to us, and we want traffic coming to our airport. So that's a good thing. Councilman Roby? We've got a motion and a second, so that's fine. I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item B is council approval of the snow removal equipment rental quotes for 2020-2021.
Motion to approve.
A motion by Lallam and a second by Holeen. And I will ask the Public Works Director to tell us about these. Heath?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And again, on this item, I've got Rob Bain, the street superintendent, on standby here that I'll hand it over to in a second. But this is our annual quotes that the street division puts out for snow removal / equipment rental services for the snow removal function that the city performs throughout the winter months. As most of the council's full well aware that we don't have enough workforce, manpower, and equipment to clean the citywide snow removal efforts. So we end up contracting out for a portion of those services throughout the year. And with that, I'll just pass over to Rob. Rob's got a spreadsheet and showing some history of the pricing that we've had over the years and how this year's quotes compare to that. And he can talk a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Heath. Like Heath was saying, this is our annual bids for our snow removal and equipment rental quotes. I want to show you guys a little PDF here of a graph showing the last 5 seasons we've dealt with. Let's see if I can get this to come up. Can you guys see that on the screen?
Yep.
Okay. As you'll see over here on the winter of 2016 and 17, the prices for motor graders are in red. Purple is front end wheel loaders. This blue is our semis with side dump trailers. This green is tandem axle dump trucks. That's mainly what we use is these 4 lines here. But as you can see, this year some of our prices came in a little bit better. We had a drop in our average of loaders in price there. So that's actually about what we were paying back in 16 and 17 for an average across the board. So, and same with semi tractor trailers, side dump, that went down a little bit as well. But as you can see, it's a incline and everything else for the motor graders and tandem axle dump trucks. So I just kind of wanted to show you guys an average of what this has done over the years and kind of what we were back in 16 and 17 and what we're paying on average this year in 2021. So any questions on that?
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Councilman Lallam?
Rob, what are you attributing that drop in? Is that fuel costs, or how come some of those went down?
Is why it went down. I kind of wonder if some of the things like the wheel loaders are really competitive. We do get quite a few bids on those. A lot of people own wheel loaders. I think that's part of it, just the bidding, everybody's bidding competitive on that. Usually trucks are pretty competitive, but as you can see, the trucks have really only went up about $6 over the last 5 years, so that's not bad at all. Semi-tractors, we actually did have another bidder come in with semi and side dump that dropped the average down, so their price was really good, so it did drop the average down. I think, I don't know if COVID's causing more people needing work or what, but our prices are pretty good this year. Our motor graders, though, we do have a small group there, and the prices do continue to increase, as you can see.
Very good. Very helpful information. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer?
A couple of questions, Rob. First of all, are we getting enough? I know that's been an issue the last couple of years. Do we have enough to carry us through the winter now as far as contractors out there?
We do. Last winter was really good, and I think this winter we're on the same track. A lot of people quoted this year. I'd say the motor graders are always what we see the least of. Of course, we use a lot of motor graders, but not a lot of people have those. The side dumps, the tandems, and the loaders, a lot of people do have those.
Okay. And also, have you done the same sort of chart by contractor? I guess what I'm alluding to, and I'm not going to publicly mention the name, but I know one of the bidders was consistently higher than the others in the spreadsheet that we've got. Is that unusual, or is that particular contractor typically on the high side compared to the others?
We have seen some contractors raise their prices drastically, and some of them, sometimes the contractors will see a slight raise, but we did see, I'm trying to think here, I'm looking at the sheet that you might have. I think if I do remember right, we did have one or two that raised up like $20 an hour, I believe, because these prices you see here are per hour per machine. So the $188.75 is an average of what you'd see per hour that it would cost us on average. But we did have some raise their prices quite drastically, and I don't know if it's, sometimes contractors have a lot of work on the table. They might have bids that they have in place with some of the big parking lots and that type of thing for these big box stores. So you see some of the prices go up occasionally because of that. They might have a contract for the winter that way. I don't have any graph at the moment for those. I could do something up where it just doesn't put the name out there, but it does show what they went up throughout each season. I could put something like that together.
Well, I'm just hoping that we're not being taken advantage of because there is a shortage of providers out there that we aren't getting taken advantage of by some of the bidders at times.
Right. I see what you're saying there. And I will be coming to you guys with a Snowgate discussion, I believe at the next council meeting, and I could put something together for showing the last 5 years or so what we've had for the main contractors, basically what their prices have been. If you would like something like that.
That would be helpful, Rob, thanks.
Okay. Anything else?
Rob, I had a question on the Snowgate quote. We did get one quote with a Snowgate. Is that is that a 200?
Yeah, $225 per hour for that machine.
And that's a motor grader with a
With the Snowgate, correct.
Snowgate.
Yep.
Okay.
And this contractor that is offered that doesn't currently have the Snowgate, but is willing to purchase one if
Oh, I
we
see.
decide to use that.
Okay.
And his machine would handle it too. He does have the type of machine that would handle it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Councilman Roby?
What is our position on Snowgates right now, Rob? I guess my thoughts was the directions we were going away from them. So are we going to continue? Can you just tell us what the plan is there?
That's actually what I want to come to talk to you guys about in 2 weeks about the Snowgate discussion, if we're keeping them and expanding, or if we're going to look at eliminating them altogether. We're still planning, I'm still set up to move forward with Snowgates as we have the last several years. But, you know, I'll bring that to you guys at the next council meeting to discuss it in depth. And I guess actually Public Works meeting, I should say, but to discuss it in depth and give you any detailed information you need to make a good decision.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Rob, question for you. The Snowgate, you said the one bidder has a Snowgate would be a part of the bid, the use of that Snowgate. Is that something that, did you say they have purchased or have not purchased that at this point?
They have not purchased it
Okay.
yet.
So
They
our
will-
discussion it could be pending on our discussion in a couple of weeks, whether or not they would bid that with a Snowgate.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I'll look for action then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thanks, Rob and Heath.
Yep. Thank you.
Item C is approval of construction change order number 3, final, with Reedy Construction, Inc. for the Highway 212 sanitary sewer project number 1802 for an increase of $68,379.97. I have a motion by Helene and a second by Lallam. And Heath, tell us about this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this change order is in relation to the Highway 212 sanitary sewer project. It's been going on for 2 construction seasons now. As you recall, it began last year in coordination with phase 1 of the Highway 212 reconstruction. We were directed by the DOT that we were notified by the DOT that our sewer main was in the way of the new bridge construction and had to be realigned in order to accommodate the new bridge and the new foundation system for the bridge on 212. So with that, we entered into a design contract with IDG. I guess I'm not certain, Vanessa, are you on the line here tonight with us? And if not, that's okay. We've got the change order details here that Justin and Marcy, the engineering staff, have worked on in detail with IDG and with the contractors involved. But since that work started progression early last year, as if you think back to what the conditions were last year, as we all recall, is very wet, troublesome construction conditions for most any projects throughout the state last year. And our project was bid with the DOT's project, which brought a lot of benefits to the work. Coordination aspect between the DOT's contractors and the city contractors, and all the benefits that that brings in being allowed to bid our work with the DOT's project. So with that, we also use the DOT as kind of a marker as how they applied liquidated damages and how they applied change orders in relation to weather events and weather impacts on the project, the main DOT 212 project. And we kind of use them as a marker for those determinations as well to kind of help provide some guidance and direction, even though we are under our own contract with Reedy Construction. And that's what this change order is for. It's specific to the city's contract with Reedy Construction for the sewer main work. And the reason I'm giving all this background information is because that's how this has evolved into the increase in the contract amount. Due to the extreme weather conditions, the contractor wasn't able to get into the sewer main work in the time frame that they had originally planned to. And then as the timeline progressed through the season last year, the bridge contractor came on site and needed to start the demo of the bridge. What ended up happening is our contractor ended up building and constructing a lot more long-term bypass pumping system to keep the sewer flowing safely to the wastewater treatment plant in order to get the main out of the bridge contractor's way. Well, that more robust system ended up costing them to the tune of, I believe, is close to $200,000. As you can see on this change order, we're not proposing to pay for that full amount by any means. But what that did do is let us down once the work was complete, which it is. It led us into a phase of negotiating what the liquidated damages might be like due to the delays, what the overruns and change orders might look like. And again, going back to my comment with the DOT, what the DOT did on their project, they extended the completion date from last fall. It was originally, I believe it was last October or November completion date. They extended that to June of this year. And so we use that as one of the markers, one of the pieces of guidance to, how to potentially handle our contract. We did have a substantial number of liquidated damage days that we could have assessed on this project. There was a pretty significant change order request that was made on this project for the additional work, and that was to the tune of about $200,000. But through the negotiations with the contractor and the subcontractor, we've settled on the change order that's before the council tonight. And staff, we really feel like this is a good, positive way to move forward to close this project out. We are paying a little bit more than we originally anticipated, but we're also paying a lot less than what the contractor had asked for and what they felt was warranted due to the delays and the weather conditions and things of that nature. So with all that being said, like I said, I have Justin and Marcy on the line here as well, and they can help answer any detailed questions that we might have about the change order itself or about the contractor's work, and we'll open the floor for any questions.
All right, thank you. Councilman Hoyer.
Heath, I imagine that we bid this out, of course, originally. Where does this contractor lie with the other contractors that made bids? Were they the lowest? Were they higher than some of the other ones? Where did they sit amongst those?
Yes, so on the original bids, Justin or Marcy might have the exact numbers, but they were well under the next low bidder, I believe to the tune of I want to say almost $300,000 below the next low bidder. And so this change order amount, bringing the total contract up to $414,000 roughly, still leaves them the lowest bidder to the tune of, I'm guessing, at least $100,000.
That was a good question. Councilman Rademski.
Heath, those other bidders, did they include in their bid what this bidder is now submitting as a change order?
Yeah, another great question, Councilman. So it's hard to discern with the way this project was bid out. There's certain components to the project like dewatering, and some of the means and methods that the contractors pick on their own once they get the project. You know, it's up to them how to carry those things out. So we don't necessarily know for sure what kind of a bypass pumping system some of the other contractors were planning to install or planning to utilize. But I can tell you that the pricing, we did look back at that, and you know, there weren't, unless you can correct me, Justin or Marcy, I don't think there were any real big red flags on the numbers being real far off. So I think what we've settled on here is fair and amicable and doesn't tip the scales to favor any other bidders. I can say that with high level of confidence.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Heath, I got to say, this is a pleasant surprise from, because I had 200,000+ in my memory banks from the last time we discussed this. This is a pleasant surprise. So I guess, so this finalized from a legal standpoint, if we agree to this, this does close out this project then, that they can come back on us for some additional, you know, work or charges?
Yeah, no, another great question, Councilman, and I'll never pretend to act as a legal advisor, but as far as a contract is concerned, from an engineering standpoint, yes, this will close the contract out. The indications from the contractor and their sub is that they're amicable to this and agreeable to this. So I don't foresee any other future legal action taken against us for not providing additional funding. I think that would have, that push or that ask would have come in these final negotiations.
Okay. Thanks, Heath.
Councilman Hoyer?
I'm just curious. So how does that work normally if somebody, is that in our contract that we write with them just to give them that leeway to push for something? Because there's still a part of me that feels like they maybe should have bid higher to start with, just in case something like this would have happened, which it looks like the other contractors did that. So it's hard, just kind of in an ethical way for me to feel like it's in the best interest, I don't know, to basically give you a go on this. Coming back for 68 is a lot less than 200,000, but it still just feels like there could have been better management of that project to avoid some of the stuff from the get-go, or just like our bidding process could have been cleaner, or I don't know what the contractor missed on that really set this up. I mean, we can blame weather, but if you had a plan already built in there, just in case we ever have a wet summer again, maybe making this a little more avoidable in the future. Because $68,000 isn't like a small amount. I mean, we've balked at like 10,000 before. This is a lot more than that.
Right.
Yeah, and if I could, to the councilman's question, you know, as far as how this normally works, yeah, anytime you have a bid like this, there's always the unknowns where a change order could come into play. And particularly a project that runs long, you let the process unfold, you let the contractor complete the work, you continue to count the liquidated damage days, you continue to track the weather, you continue to track all the impacts on the project, all the progress of the work, process all the regular pay applications and all those things, all just the same. But when you get into a situation like this, we are pretty diligent on tracking all those things, and that's what we've done with IDG. And when you get to the end, that's the goal. No matter what happens with any project, you don't want to make sure that the work is complete. That's goal number one. And once you get to that point, then you open up these negotiations to, and I call it a negotiation because sometimes a change order is pretty black and white. But when you have delays due to weather, circumstances beyond the contractor's control, you're a sub project underneath a parent project, and you're looking at the parent project for some guidance, like for instance with the DOT, all those things start to kind of weigh into the decision making, and then what I call the negotiation phase. And that's exactly what happened here. When we got into that phase, we started to analyze what the impacts were, what caused the delays. Was some of that on the contractor's responsibility? You're absolutely right. Was some of that beyond their control? I would venture to say yes, that's absolutely true as well. And so that's where we get into this little bit of give and a little bit of take in the discussions, while also following the contract language to a T and following the black and white language that we have in front of us in the contract. That's also an important part of this. When, I guess what I can say in my experience, when you, there are times where you can follow the black and white and find a ruling one way, but then you get into mitigation and you find out that all the parties don't agree with the way the owner interpreted the black and white, and you end up paying more in the long run. And so that's why this negotiation phase, I think, is an important one. It's a critical one. I think we did our due diligence to try to wade through that and find something that was respectable for the contractor, but yet was not penalizing the taxpayers either, and not errantly giving too much money to the contractor.
All right. Any other questions or comments? We'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to old business. We have 10th Avenue North discussion and proposal of final design. And I'll let Heath explain what the consultant is recommending, and then we'll have some input on that. And if you want to make a motion at that time, you can, but I won't get one until you've heard his presentation. Okay, Heath, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And again, I'll be relying on Marcy here. She's going to run a lot of the discussion. But in a nutshell, we've met initially, we had our public open house, which the council's aware of, and shared a lot of information with the homeowners along 10th Avenue regarding the reconstruction of that stretch of roadway. Presented a lot of facts and information and some of the preliminary design, and then subsequently met with each property owner one-on-one. That meeting was attended by Jason Peterson, who's also online with us here tonight, and Marcy, our engineer one, Marcy Luno. And those two together met with each and every property owner that they could get in contact with, and that agreed to meet with them and talk through the details of the design. And from there, I'll let Marcy walk through the summary, and we can discuss some of the modified design recommendations that we as staff and our consultant have prepared for the council tonight. Marcy, if you could, or Jason, lead off into the that letter.
Yep, this is Marcy. I will share my screen here and show you the letter that I'll be talking about. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so first what I kind of want to talk about is this is a recommendation from our consultant CDI. Jason Peterson put it together. The first things that we did was we did about 3 weeks of landowner meetings with all, we offered it to all of them. Not all of them were there, but the majority did meet with us. The things that we went through was notifying the number of trees in the boulevards in front of each property that would potentially need to be removed due to the widening of the street. And this was, again, at our initial recommendation of widening to 45 feet. We also talked about the temporary construction easements that would be required to grade back to the sidewalk, and also for their driveways that would be affected by the construction. Each landowner was asked if they had sprinkler systems in the right of way. They were also asked if they have some sanitary sewer issues, if they knew where their water service was. And then we did talk about the existing street width and how much it would vary in front of each landowner's property. So the highest being around 7.5 and the lowest being around 2 feet. Each landowner was able to ask questions at the end. We gave the best responses we could, knowing with what we knew. Other ones we had to go back to the landowners later with, after having a discussion internally, to find out what the right answer was. The following recommendations are what Jason and myself presented to Heath, Justin, and the committee that met on this. The street parking is the first thing that was talked about with the landowners as a something they would like to have changed. Most people were not in favor of the on-street parking, just for concerns about snow removal, doors opening into traffic, kids not being able to see around cars, different things like that. Then the street width is the second thing that was most talked about. We actually are recommending to go to a 38-foot total street width. This would be 3 11-foot lanes and then 2.5 feet on each side for new curb and gutter. And this would follow the the safety for AASHTO to provide a center turn lane. And then it would also follow as closely as possible the Watertown design standards. So with changing the road width from 45 feet to 38, we would potentially save 24 trees out of the around 68 that were originally proposed. There are possibilities that some of those 24, depending on when we get into the actual construction, could have to come out. There's potential that some of the ones that we didn't think we were going to save may be able to be saved. The sidewalks was another thing that was talked about in the landowner meetings. We are still proposing to do a full 5-foot sidewalk along the north side of the project limits. We would still recommend putting in the ADA ramps at all the corners on the north side, along with the south side that have connecting sidewalks going north. The curb radii actually was something that most of the landowners were really excited about. Many of them have had their curb and gutter destroyed over time just because it is a really sharp corner and it's caused some drainage issues. Others have had boulders at the corners that have actually been hit because people are taking the corner too tight. So they are really excited about going to that 20-foot radii. The pedestrian crossing and traffic safety. We did have a lot of concerns from landowners about different points along 10th Avenue for kids either going to Millette or going to Highland Park. We would recommend that we actually put a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at 2nd Street West. That's the main road that most kids would take to Millette School. It's a direct connection from the north, and it's also one of those streets that's becoming more traveled with the development on the north side of 14th Avenue. We will be keeping the stop signs at Maple. They, however, would have to be moved just slightly to accommodate for that 38-foot width. There has been a couple drainage concerns with the intersection of 3rd Street West and 10th Avenue. We had a couple landowners that brought some photos and videos in, so we would like to survey and look at the drainage system there a little bit closer. It's something that wasn't originally included in the scope of this project, but something that we'd like to address. There's also been some concerns with sanitary sewer services, and this was something that came up in the open house and we've extended more onto with the landowner meetings. We have a couple blocks that are, it's 4 blocks that we have private sewer systems that are connected to laterals that are not maintained or owned by the city that then go to the city's main trunk sewer system. And there's been some homeowners that have had issues with those connections, and we would like to get those corrected with the project if possible. But that's part of our recommendation, is to actually look into either assessing or paying as a city to correct some of these issues along with the homeowners on the private side. In conclusion, so just to recap, we would say no on-street parking, 38-foot width, center turn lane still, so we would have 2 11-foot driving lanes and 11-foot turning lane. We would like to do the radii 20 feet, and we would also like to do a pedestrian crossing.
Thank you.
Mayor, I will hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Marcy. Appreciate that very much. And I think this is a really good compromise, and I'm hoping that the neighborhood would appreciate it. As a note of reference for everybody, council members included, 38 feet is narrower than our narrowest new street standard. Most of the new streets that we have up in Eastwoods and River Ridge are actually a little bit like 16 inches wider than this. And those are just, even the cul-de-sacs. These are just regular local streets that are 16 inches wider. So we're not excessively wide going with a 38-foot wide street. I think that really adequately balances the safety with the neighborhood desire to not have a wide street. So, Councilman Roby?
On that point, the project originally was 42. They've reduced it to 38. What is
45.
45 reduced to 38? What is it right now? I
It
know
varies.
varies.
And Marcy, you could probably answer this best, but there are numerous different widths depending on which block you're in. Marcy, you want to answer
Yep.
that?
There are 4 blocks that are at 31 feet, and then there's a few blocks that are around the 46 and 38 and 36.
So it goes all over the place. And currently, if you want to put a brand new neighborhood in where there doesn't exist a street currently, you have to put our design standard is 39 feet 4 inches compared to 38 feet. So some of our older streets, like this one, we did have a 31-foot section, but that's pretty unusual. The streets all over town, they vary. You can kind of date them by when they were constructed. Councilman Bueller?
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to applaud the engineering folks for doing this research, and I think it was definitely the right thing to do. And I do believe that this is an excellent compromise for the landowners and for the city to build this street correctly and save some trees along the way too.
Yeah.
So thanks to all you folks for that.
We do have some landowners in the audience. If any of them would like to speak, you're welcome to come forward. Please state your name for the record.
I hate to admit just how long I've been a resident at that address, but 50 years. I could go clear up to 85 years and still be in the same block, with the exception of maybe a year or two in there. I have found through the years that traffic up even through today moves just about the same that it always has moved. I think that I not only speak for my wife and I, but for a number of people on 10th Avenue that we appreciate the procedure that you folks are going through, the explanations. We appreciate that things seem to be going in the right direction. We would just like it to go further, to leave it at the same width. One of the things that I think about is the city of Sioux Falls. If you're going to Sanford Hospital, which is certainly a huge medical facility, you get off on 12th and you go on Kiwanis up to 18th Street, and 18th Street takes you to the Sanford Hospital. And as I recall making that trip a number of times, it's through a residential area, and I think that probably the street widths are fairly similar to ours. They certainly don't have 3-lane traffic. They don't have turning lanes, and yet I've never found any problem as far as the traffic is concerned. I know that for our family and for others that have talked since this newspaper article came out, we're concerned about the width. And I think maybe I'm quoting the mayor when in the newspaper article it says if you have broad, wide, and comfortable lanes, you drive faster. The narrower lanes are slower than the people drive. Then the people drive slower. Well, that's our concern. My family, my kids have used Highland Park. It's a very popular spot. A lot of foot traffic across 10th Avenue. And we are concerned that by widening and adding a third lane, which we don't feel is necessary, you're just simply speeding up the traffic. I can't count the number of times I've seen people going way too fast on 10th Avenue and failing to stop at the stop sign at the corner of 10th and Maple. They go right through it. Sometimes they realize that they are going too fast and can't get stopped, and they knock down the stop sign at that intersection. We appreciate what you folks are going. We think you're going in the right direction. You've certainly been open with us, and I think have given us a good understanding. I've visited one house on 10th Avenue where they have a gunsmith shop in the back. And I looked at those trees, and they are two very unusual trees. They're huge. I'm afraid that they would be taken. But I think they're mountain ash, but they are huge, huge, beautiful trees. We just think that it is a beautiful residential area, and we hope that maybe before we're through that we can keep the width at the same that it currently is. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. And we will do our very best to save as many of the trees that we can. That is a beautiful neighborhood. And for the record, I just pulled up 18th Street in Sioux Falls by Sanford Hospital. There's a center turn lane. And it's, I don't know what the width is because I can't measure it on Google Map, but I can see the center turn lane all down the street. So it's at least 3 lanes. So I'm quoted accurately in the newspaper. We're going from 2 lanes that are at a minimum 15 and a half to 16 feet wide or wider to 3 lanes of 11 feet in width. And while there are people that will completely ignore the center turn lane, most people will not. And driving that close to the curb is not going to be as comfortable as having that, 15-foot wide lane there is right now. So I do believe that this new configuration will be traffic calming, and I think this is the right thing to do, and appreciate your input. Anyone else want to speak?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juanita Lentz, and I live on the corner of 10th Avenue and 81. And I've been there for quite a while too, and I can't see a turning lane being an issue there. I don't think we need one. I'd hate to see all the parking on the south side because, north side, whatever, because we have a lot of people that, safety-wise, I think you're gonna have a problem with it because people are gonna be running into you. And when the snow starts coming down, it gets really icy on that road, and you're gonna see a lot more sliding. I see a lot of children and adults walking along there, and I think it's going to be a problem with, even if you do put up the walks and make it safety, and I'm thinking, I appreciate what they have done because I know they're trying to make it safe for all the kids and adults that are walking, but I cannot see a turning lane. I think what we should do is just redo the surface of the road. Don't make it any wider, just do the curves that are in, or the part of it, because they are bad. The water in the sewer system could be brought up to date because it is bad, and I'm one of them that goes kitty corner across. From my house, it goes halfway down the road. So that is a big problem the sewer system is. But I just cannot see putting a turning lane on there and upsetting a lot of people that live up there. The trees, we understand part of them aren't good. I understand that part. But there are some that are, and I hope you keep as many as you can because it's a beautiful area up there.
All right. Thank you.
Any questions for me? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Tommy Radley. I live on the blue house on the corner. Some people would call it the Hanson or Fox house over the years. I guess I wasn't really planning to talk tonight. I wanted to just come and listen, and I know I missed the first part of the rundown. I do appreciate the time you guys have taken. I know Councilman Lallam, I've taken up a lot of your time, sometimes with phone calls, and Councilman Rademski, you're in my ward as well, so I appreciate and I know how busy you guys are, and you guys have always been good about getting back to me or other council members when I emailed or called. So with this, you know, I would tell you the first proposal when people attended that meeting, you know, I think people were very civil and cordial. Everybody wore masks, but there was a lot of sticker shock with the information that was presented at the Wellness Center that night. I'm happy to see that we're moving in a direction where we're considering maybe some of those concerns that were not part of the original proposal of 45 feet. You know, and I can go down the concerns, whether it was the trees, to how it might impact pedestrian safety, to even snow removal, which is a big part because we do live in an environment where I hope we don't have snow this week, but we have snow, you know, November to April usually. So there's a lot of factors that when you remove, even though the boulevard is considered city property, people do treat that as their own. And, you know, if you remove that space, there's other snow issues by properties and so on. So I do ask that you look at all of the factors, you know, in terms of a turning lane. You know, here's where I'll end with my comments. Having lived there now for over 10 years and certainly listening to residents that have lived there for 50 plus, or I think some of you, what I would just ask you to do when you drive it, you know, ask yourself, what do you want this street to look like? And I realize the importance of the hospital in our neighborhood. And I say that because my dad's life was saved by that hospital. So I know how important an ambulance ride to get there can be. That you got a federal highway with 81 running on the other side. And if you had a highway and a hospital and it was just cornfield, we would develop this street a lot differently. But the neighborhood has been there for over 100 years. I'm glad that the discussion has turned to view this more as a neighborhood, not just a street. And I think maybe that was one of the problems to begin with this process. But those are just the things I ask as we move forward, and I'm sure I'll have plenty of thoughts as we get to more open houses or phone calls along the way. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Council, any other questions or comments? Councilman Lallam?
Marcy, I had asked you about that sewer. Did you have a chance to look that up?
Yes, Justin, excuse me, came up with a rough estimate for us, and we're looking at between $150,000 to $200,000 for the total cost of the main and the private services.
What's the breakdown on that then?
Breakdown as in how much for homeowners or how much for the main and the manholes?
For the homeowners versus the cities.
So, Heath, can you jump in with that? You had a...
Yeah, I think according to Justin's numbers, of that 150 to 200, about 30,000 of that was for service line work. So really the discussion before the council tonight is one, do we want to address these sewer connection issues? It's city staff recommendation that we do, mainly because the road's going to be tore up. We're going to have access to the sewer mains. The issues at hand is we've got a small handful of these streets where 3 to 4, sometimes maybe 5 of these houses are all on one shared sewer service line. And Marcy could pull up a map and share a screen, and we can kind of talk in more detail what we're looking at here. But all these shared service lines then tie into the side street sewer mains, because 10th doesn't hardly have any sewer mains running underneath it. So if you see that green line there that Marcy's running her cursor down, that's a private sewer service line that's shared by those 4 residents. Now, what would conventionally be done, and what would be done by our engineering design standard, is that red sewer main in the street, or that red line. Imagine that red line being extended further east towards Highway 81 there. And then each one of those individual houses would come out straight laterally from their house, laterally from the sewer main, and then tie right into the sewer main. And that's how our ordinances read today, is that each separate lot, each platted lot, and each building on it has its own separate sewer service line. The issue we have is with configurations like this, whenever there's a break in that shared line, when that shared line gets plugged, when somebody has to do maintenance on it, it usually involves a homeowner having to work with either their neighbor or several other neighbors to, a lot of times there's a lot of blame placed on whose fault it is, whose cost it is, whose sewage is in whose basement, and all those things that nobody wants to deal with. And so while we've got the road tore up, it'd be our recommendation to go ahead and extend that main under the street, and then have each homeowner connect the proper way to that sewer main while the street is tore open. Now, if we were to do that, that's where that $150,000 to $200,000 cost comes into play. That cost conventionally would be assessed back to the homeowners on a per frontage basis. We estimate there's probably 10 to 12 homeowners that would have to share that cost. So that's a pretty substantial cost. You know, let's say it's 170 grand for all the sewer work, and there's 10 homes, that's 17 grand a piece that would have to be assessed back to each one of those properties. That's conventionally how issues like this have been addressed in Watertown. The sewer main and their private service line would both be assessed back to the homeowners. I wouldn't necessarily propose this because it's not what we've done in the past, but the other option is the city pays for the extension of the main, and then the homeowner still pays for their own private service line to connect to that main. That's another option that I've seen other cities exercise, but again, that wouldn't be in line with the history of how we've treated these kind of corrections in the past. I'd say the other option is to leave these as is, but if we do that, our wastewater policies, I don't believe Superintendent Berger's on the line tonight, but our wastewater policies are that if any of these shared lines like this have issues, when they go in to correct them, the Sewer Division of Public Works requires the property owner to correct them to meet today's standards, which would mean potentially people cutting into our new street, extending mains, adding new service lines into our new streets 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 years from now, all things we'd just as soon like to try to prevent from happening. So that's the conundrum that's kind of come up. That's probably the biggest talking point tonight that we wanted some direction from the council on. You know, conventionally we would move forward with extending the mains, installing the services properly, and assessing those costs back to the homeowners. Knowing what those costs are, you know, I don't know what the council's thoughts would be towards doing that on this project. And it's something we'd like to talk about. If you got any more questions on it, we can sure help answer them.
Thank you. And I would like to add, they council does not have to make that decision right now, that this hasn't even been designed yet, and there's time for you to think it through and look into past practices and just see how we've done it. And see Dan has his hand up. Dan, did you want to say something? Councilman
Thanks,
Albertson?
Mayor. A week ago when we were talking, you had mentioned there's going to be another street car survey done on 10th Avenue. Is there any more talk about that? Is that going to happen? There seems to be such a wide variance of how many cars use 10th Avenue per day. I mean, I've heard 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 7,000. I'm just curious as to if there is a follow-up as far as numbers of cars, which could make a difference in my mind as to how much room you need for cars to pass through. And there is a nice turning lane up by the hospital, by the way, already built there. That must be that 45-foot lot or 45-foot wide road there. There's a nice turning lane there already built in, so.
Right, I'll let Heath answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. The additional traffic counts that Councilman Albertson is referring to are in relation to our transportation master plan that's underway. They are anticipating doing counts here next week. HDR is our consultant on that project, and their subcontractor will be doing traffic counts throughout town as early as next week. To the councilman's question, you're right, Dan, that there are multiple numbers out there depending on the data that you look at. Reason being is those traffic counts are taking at different times of the year throughout the year by the DOT. And for instance, DOT's 2020 counts were taken about a month ago. So if you can imagine our traffic a month ago compared to today on 10th after school's now in session, there's obviously some fluctuations throughout the year depending on the season that we're in. And so some of the numbers that we've seen on some of the maps have been as high as 7,000 vehicles per day. I'm guessing that was in one of the peak times of year. School was in session. Might have been a lot of different hospital traffic due to expansions or things of that nature. I'm not sure, but then the more average numbers we're seeing are around that 4,500 to 4,800 vehicles per day is where it seems to be most averaged on the data that we've looked at. But we'll have that HDR data. It'll probably be a good few weeks out before we have any good usable data from them. But definitely something that we could look at. That I wouldn't necessarily want to cease our design progression with CDI on this project for 3 or 4 weeks. I think, moving forward, potentially with what we've explained tonight would be the appropriate thing to do. And if we see anything stark, any stark numbers from our recent traffic data, we could definitely bring that to light, share it with the council, and help alleviate any concerns at that point.
All right, thank you. I see Jason Peterson has his hand up. That's our consultant. Jason, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
I guess what I'd like to do is just thank everybody for their comments. It has been a pretty long process, meeting with all the landowners and going through everything with them. I would like to echo what the mayor has said with the turning lanes and the need for those and having some traffic calming. I feel that the section recommended will naturally calm the traffic. I personally drive on some wider streets that don't have the turn lanes, and I notice myself driving faster on those compared to the streets that have more traffic and the narrower lanes and the turn lanes. And so the other thing I want to point out is with all the varying different widths on this street, it's important that we pick one section through the whole thing. To have varying widths on the street creates an unsafe condition, and to reconstruct this thing, we need to pick one width and have it from one end to the other with the appropriate transition or transitions at each end. So I guess I just wanted to point out a couple of those things to maybe help the council make some decisions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilman Lallam?
One of the things I did find out after learning more about streets than I ever thought I would, that even if we go through now and fix the road, which is what most of the people I've talked to want to see, is that the road gets fixed. The crown's pretty high and there's cracks and plenty of repair items on there. Even doing that, it's not going to alleviate us from having to remove trees simply because the way the roots grow. And when you start taking out behind, the curb and gutter, you're going to have to pull some of that out behind there to make sure that it is correctly done. So as much as I would love to see everything stay, I mean, we're going to make some changes either way. And it's kind of one of those, you have to bite the bullet on some of them. And unfortunately, we're going to lose some of those neighborhood feels to a certain point, but hopefully we can mitigate that as low as possible and have a road that works for probably the next 30, 40 years realistically, because I don't see it getting changed anytime soon. So just a few comments.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer?
Circling back, Heath, circling back on the sewer line issue, were these landowners specifically made aware of the situation and the possible remedies and the potential related costs?
Yeah, Marcy or Jason, could you touch on the extent you guys discussed that?
Yeah, this is Marcy. I can touch on that. So we talked to each of the landowners that this could affect. We did not have a cost at the time that we met with all the landowners. So we did not make them aware of what that was going to cost them, potentially, if we move forward with this. And but we did talk to them individually and showed them that map that I presented while Heath was talking, so that they could see where their lines go, where we know their lines go for sure.
So you didn't have estimated cost, but did you mention that they might be liable for for making it the way it should be?
The only thing that I did say was that they will for sure be responsible for their private sewers. As far as the extensions of the main, I was a little wishy-washy on that because I didn't know what our previous projects had done, whether the city paid for it or whether that was assessed back.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. What would we estimate the cost on? We had 4 of those I saw on the north side. They're right by 10th. What would we estimate the landowner costs to be to tie into those if say the city does pay for the extension of the main?
I think, Councilman Bueller, that it's fair to say about $3,000 to $4,000, $3,000 to $4,000 per house for those sewer service line work. Is that correct, Justin, based on those numbers you looked at?
Yeah, with the preliminary numbers we have, that's probably our best estimate this time.
Thank you.
Councilman Lallam?
Heath, on that sewer, what have we done in the past on those private ones where we've had to go through and make changes? I recall something in that meeting, you said that if one of them's bad, that they have to replace them all. Is that what it has been?
Yeah. If that shared line were to go down, sewer, the policy in the past is that they correct them all and that they all individually get their own private services and eliminate the shared one. Now in this case, if we were to pave this road back and then that were to happen, of course that would mean tearing the road back out, extending the main, and then reconnecting each individual service line.
So they would be responsible for that entire cost then at that point, including the road surface and all that.
Yes, and that's another great point, Councilman, that this does prevent the homeowners from having to be assessed that pavement cost or pay for that pavement cost in rebuilding the road under the latter situation happening.
One thing I could point out, I mean, I've been in a lot of projects where we ran into 1 or 2 of these, and then we just basically had you can talk to our contractor if you want, but it's not part of our project. Just coordinate with the contractor. then they hire the contractor to do the work. When it's so extensive and there's so many of them, I don't think that's a good idea. In this case, I think we'd want to hire the contractor and be involved to make sure that we don't have another contractor in there mucking the work up of our prime contractor. So we haven't required people necessarily to take a private sewer like the ones that you saw there that are running down the boulevard, a shared sewer, to put that out in the street. This is the right time to do it though, and I'm sure they're having root problems if they're out in the boulevard. They're far less likely to have root problems with the sanitary sewer main out in the street rather than running down the boulevard or between houses where there tend to be more trees and closer to their sewer. So it's, you know, there's a lot of them here. There's going to be a savings not having to do the asphalt repair and also having the group of, you know, it's a scale factor in there. So you got one contractor doing 10 to 12 sewers should bring the price down. Councilman Vilhauer?
I agree completely that this is the time to get it correct. I don't want to see happen there what has been happening along South Lake Drive with the water main issues out there. The same summer after we had that totally milled and overlaid out there, we had a number of different places. That's old water lines out there from when that was annexed in, and water mains breaking, and the homeowners had to pay for tearing up a brand new street, and that's happened a number of times out there. Now, I don't want to see that happen up there on 10th Avenue with the sewer line. So if we're going to get it straight, now is the time to get it done. It's a matter of, you know, can we make it financially, you know, palatable to city and the homeowners.
Right, and we do have the ability, if we assess it, to spread it out over 10 years, which could be a benefit. But like I said, you don't have to decide that right now. Councilman Bueller?
There is a warranty to that too. I mean, if we do it, if we're responsible at the beginning for putting that in, is it a year warranty? How long is it? A year? Thanks.
After we would accept it. Councilman Hoyer?
I would just kind of tie back to, did we ever get input yet from the hospital on just the kind of issues they were having with like ambulance route problems going through there? I know that was a question that got brought up for me.
Yeah, not from the hospital, but from the ambulance services, us. And I did talk to the chief of the fire department who manages the ambulance. And, I mean, I'm sure they would appreciate this. They haven't had issues, but that doesn't mean they won't.
Sure, because that's always one of the things that when it comes to spending this kind of money and doing these kinds of projects, yes, the road needs to be redone. Yes, we need to redo the curb and gutter there. It's just making sure that we are, in fact, actually solving an issue versus potentially creating a new one by changing it. I would trust that it would help adding the extra lane to it. I'm just, if we can have some definable things that we are, in fact, improving there, that would be great. I worry a little bit adding the extra lane just because I almost think that some drivers are going to view that as I have more room on the side because they're just going to scoot towards the center where they can.
Unless there's a car there.
Unless there's a car there, then they'll slow down. It'll pinch them up. That's how it
Right.
works downtown too. But yeah, just making it sure we have that really defined problem set that this is resolving. I'm glad we're doing another traffic count just because those numbers really did vary quite a bit. But
They did vary a lot, but even the low numbers are high numbers for a neighborhood.
Sure.
You can tell this is a collector route by the numbers. And more people drive this street than they drive the typical neighborhood streets. And they, you know, that's evident from just looking at it. And the number of accidents as well. This has a high number of accidents relative to other streets. And it's not the most number of accidents on any local street. I think 3rd Avenue by the high school has more. But other sections that aren't next to, you know, a place like, I won't say who drives that, but, you know, I think it's a high number relative to a neighborhood street that isn't a collector.
Okay.
Councilman Helene.
Thank you, Mayor. This would be a question for, I guess, anyone who wants to field it. I think that you make a good point about accidents, but I'm just curious, Because I've read studies where if you increase the width of a street, people will drive faster. And
The lane width, but
Yeah, the lane
we're
width.
going from a 15-foot lane to an 11-foot lane. So we're actually creating a narrower lane. And other than the folks who are driving in the middle of the night that are going to not see any cars in the turn lane, and they're probably going to speed. And it's not, I mean, the 31 feet is a pretty narrow street. Most of our streets are not that narrow. This 38 feet is probably the most common width that we have in our town for a 2-lane street. And most of the time people are parking, but we're not going to allow parking. So people will see that center turn lane and they'll be driving closer to the curb, and that's driving next to the curb makes you feel uncomfortable, as opposed to driving in a 14-foot wide lane where you feel like you have a lot of room.
Okay, then how would that increase the calming issue that you had
Because you're
referenced?
close to the curb when you're driving. You're
But
not
then
going to be
you were saying that people get more stressed out driving closer to the curb.
That slows them
I'm
down.
not
It slows
accusing.
them.
I
That's
actually
why-
really don't know.
Right. That's what slows people down, is the feeling that you don't have a lot of space, like that you're going to hit something. That's what we call traffic calming, is that feeling that there's an obstruction. The curb is close to your wheel, so people naturally will drive more slowly than if you have, like, obviously if we had two 11-foot lanes, people would be crawling, but we don't do streets that are 22 feet wide with curb and gutter in them. The standard street for years and years was 38 feet from face of curb to face of curb, and now it's 39 in our design standards. This is even narrower though, with a back of curb to back of curb at 38 feet.
Thank you. I see Councilman Hoyer has his hand up, but real quick, what is the timeline? When do we have to know our final design, or when is it desired?
Well, very soon, I think. And Heath, I was going to ask you what kind of motion are you looking for? Do you want direction from the council, or was this just intended to be informational? What were you looking for?
Yeah, some direction tonight, at least on the street width, would be beneficial to keep our consultant moving forward and to keep on our timeline that we had planned for. The sewer design and the sewer determinations, maybe by the next meeting we can finalize those as far as whether to move forward with the sewer main extensions and how we would handle the costs. But if tonight we can touch on and get some direction on the street lane the street width determinations, that'd be great. And just to add a little bit of clarity to that, because of the questions that are being presented here today, we are widening the street, so the street will become wider. That's a fact. But I think some of the discussion gets a little bit muddled when we talk about the lane widths versus street widths. While the street is becoming wider, the lane widths are actually getting narrower. So the driving lane that we will have on this new section ends up only being 11 feet wide. Right now we've got 15 to 16 foot wide driving lanes. Because if you imagine that whole 31, 32 foot street that's out there, we've got 2 lanes. You can picture a center line, even though it's not striped, picture a center line right in the middle of the road. You got essentially 2 15 to 16 foot lanes, which is a pretty wide lane. That allows people, it gives them a high level of comfort when they're driving. They end up driving a little bit faster than they maybe should be. And now the new street section, even though the overall street will be wider, it's going to be striped. That center turn lane will be striped. And as you know, most people don't tend to drive over into that center turn lane. They tend to stay outside of that yellow line, and they're going to be in an 11-foot lane now versus a 15 to 16-foot lane. And that's the calming effect that the mayor's been referring to, and that Jason and I have also talked about, that is inherent to narrowing of the traffic lanes. Even though the street width is wider, the traffic lanes will be narrower.
All right, thank you. Councilman Hoyer?
So I'm just going to toss this in. When you do research like road widths and stuff, when you're within about 4 feet of any object, you feel like you're going to touch it when you're
Right.
driving. That's like your human psyche. That's what kicks in, so you slow down. But I was curious, do we know, like just as an example, because everyone always feels like it's so narrow, but like in the downtown here, when you have vehicles parked, about how wide are lanes right now down there?
I believe they're in that 11-foot.
That's kind of what I thought. They were
Yes.
close to it. Okay. So just
And
as a
people
frame
are
of reference.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know. They feel like a squeeze, and it's good because we need them to drive slow because there's people. But yeah, just so if somebody needed a mental image, I guess, of about what that width feels like, or something near to it or comparable.
Yeah, and it might be 10 downtown. I'm not sure with, and you get the pickups that I think it is closer to 11,
Sure.
and the long vehicles stick out into it.
It'd just be nice going forward if we could have some visuals of some of these
Yeah.
things so that they're representative visually versus us trying to imagine.
That's true. Yep. Mr. Mattingly, you can come up and identify yourself into the microphone again.
Tom Mattingly again. I guess my question, I missed this because I came in late with the presentation. What was the boulevard width going to be as far as being removed? I know right now I have a 12-foot boulevard, and if you think about whether my street is 31 feet right now or even a little bit wider.
Yeah, it varies, and I don't know what we have numerous different widths of the street, and it's widening anywhere from 2 to 7 feet.
And my concern would just be that you're having a turning lane, so you're not using the middle of the street now, more than likely. You know, you're using the 2 lanes. You're moving people closer to the curb, and then my boulevard is now not 12 feet anymore. Originally, the plan was for it to be 4. You're moving cars closer to my yard. Or I just think about when people are out doing, mowing their yard, or if just people are on the sidewalk in general. You're bringing cars moving closer, the actual pedestrians on the sidewalk versus the current 31 feet, where you're saying they're not driving close to the curb, they're driving more in the middle. That would just be one point of observation living on the street right there. The other thing I would say is I would challenge you guys again, just think about when you drive that street. If you're putting a turning lane in because you think traffic is being backlogged, most people who turn, if you drive that street, you maybe wait 5 seconds for the person to turn if there is an oncoming car, and you go. Besides Holy Name getting out at 9:30 and 11:30 every Sunday morning, and if you're racing to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, the traffic on the street does flow pretty well. So those are just some things to think about, but like I said, my concern would be that people are now driving closer to the curb with smaller boulevards.
True. Can't argue that. Councilman Vilhauer.
I've got a question for you, Heath. In light of what you would like of us tonight, I mean, you said you'd like some direction relative to the street width, but were you not also planning on having another public forum on this at some point?
Yeah, we would anticipate having one more public forum to present any modified design that is decided on, and share that with again whoever's wants to come from the public to attend that.
So you're not necessarily looking at that public forum as being a means to gather input for potential future changes. In other words, you want more direction tonight to report whatever changes we're going to come up with.
Yeah, I think I was hoping tonight we could make some decisions on that street width and then move forward accordingly in the design with that, and then pan out the wastewater, the sewer main issues at a future date, and then make some final decisions on that as well.
All right. So, Councilman Albertson, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question maybe for Heath, because I'm really glad to see that we're not talking about parking on the south side anymore. How much of the land would those people, I'm sure you've driven by it many times, the parking and the driveways and close to the houses and all that, if it's a 38-foot wide street, how much would the people on the south side of the street lose? And I know it varies from, if it's already 38 feet, 0, but if it's 31 feet, how much would the south side lose?
Yeah, great question. Marcy or Jason, do you got a handle on average there on the south side, what kind of an impact we see?
So this is Jason. So the street is not necessarily always centered. So I'm not going to try to, I guess, give a magic number to that response, to that question, because it does vary. So,
Do you have an approximation of what the variation is, depending on where you're at?
For the most part, I believe there's 1 or 2 blocks that there's actually the existing street is offset, but usually the distance that the north side is changing in width is similar to the distance that the south side is changing in width. So I believe there's about a half a foot difference. The north side typically a little bit widening a little bit more, but for the most part, the widening and the varying widths of street is about the same on both sides.
Okay. All right, Councilman Holeen.
Thank you, Mayor. Heath or anyone who would, this is just a request for information. I would like, because you guys are experts, I would like some information showing how the lane width would have the calming effect, because I'm not an expert in this area, but I've been reading some studies where they say like wider streets promotes faster traffic and actually could increase the dangers. But I know that you have thought about this, so I guess just for my own information, I think other council people might enjoy that as well, and I think that the public would, the people who live on that street might like to know that there is proof that the lane width, not just the overall width of the street, is what matters. So I would thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So we need to wrap up here, and I'm not sure I'm getting a consensus from the council. I'm hearing all over it. Is anyone ready to recommend that we move forward with the street width of 38 feet, or are people wanting to keep studying it? Councilman Vilhauer?
I'm not ready to make a recommendation on the 38-foot at this point yet. I think we've tried to reach a good compromise with this, but I'm still hearing a lot of opposition and arguments on both sides, and I'm not ready to make a decision tonight.
Okay. Anyone else is anyone willing? Councilman Hoyer?
Well, I think it just ties back to kind of what Councilman Holeen brought up too. I think we just need to define the problem set, definitively show that this is very much what needs to happen versus something we're choosing to happen, and just going over some of those facts to support it, I think would be important. Otherwise, it's hard to say, like, change it. But I think if we can show a little bit more and just do a little bit more education for us, that would be great.
Councilman Holeen?
Thanks. I would also just like a little bit more time to study it. I do want to echo how much admiration I have for the city employees who have gone so far in meeting with all of these landowners, really addressing the issue. I've sat in on that meeting where we were talking about it. I think that you guys have done a tremendous job placating the fears of a lot of the landowners that are affected, and I apologize, but my recommendation at this time is to keep working you hard on this. But I think that we can probably find a even better compromise. Thank you.
Councilman Adamski?
Question for Heath. If that street were to stay the same width as it is now, would it still be possible to change the radii on all the corners?
Yeah, that is possible to do with the current street width.
Thank you.
If I could pose a question, Mayor?
Go ahead.
Just for my clarity and to give some direction to staff here, and I agree that this process is a good one. We've vetted a lot of good public input here. I know some of the information we have provided though regarding traffic counts, street functional classifications, expansions at the hospital, accident data, crash data, different lane width configurations, just so I could maybe get a little bit more clarity on what more, aside from what Councilman Pauline just asked for, if there's anything more specific that you might need from us or want from us to help in the decision making here. and maybe it's just re-summarizing a lot of that information that we've already talked about and shared over the last month, or just wanting more direction here, I guess. So I make sure I'm giving you guys what you need so that you're feeling like you're making a sound decision.
Thank you. Councilman Roby?
Heath, to that request, I would add, we're making a decision. This is a 30, 40-year decision. So this isn't a 5-year decision. So my question is, I a lot of good arguments on both sides. I'd like to understand the ramifications moving forward. I know what the decision, if we had to make it for a 5-year decision, I know what it'd be. It'd be an easy decision. But 25, 30, 35 years, I want those considerations in the conversation.
Thank you. I think that's wise. We don't want to do it again. Councilman Lallam?
I think, Heath, for some of us, it'd be maybe just seeing how that's gonna look, where it's gonna affect, how many landowners are gonna be affected on their boulevards, and you know, where that road's gonna be. If we have a 38-foot width, we'll have a relatively good idea. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be to scale, but, you know, it's gonna take a couple feet off this side and 3 feet off that side, and I mean, that's what we wanna know, is how that's gonna affect the overall, and what people are talking about is the neighborhood. But the neighborhood is the entire northeast corner of that. So how does it affect each individual home? I mean, obviously I don't want a rendition of each house, but just each section of it is going to move this road a couple feet here, a couple feet there, and then just kind of how it overall flows.
Councilman Hoyer?
The only other thing to that effect, Heath, it would be great if we just had that overhead view, even if it's just a Google Earth view of the road, and then see an overlay of what that 38 looks like on that, so we can actually see what it cuts into and what it doesn't cut into. And then the ones that are wider than that, where it's going to pull forward to, just so we can really physically see what it is.
Great.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Anyone else want to weigh in before we got to get going here? Got a lot of input. I'm not
Just
hearing.
one point, Mayor.
Please make it quick. Mr. Austin, state your name and the microphone.
I think if you go back and go through the procedure of explaining to people what this does to their property with that public meeting again, and so that they know how their property is impacted by the change.
That's what the councilman requested. Thank you. I think we can do that. All right, I'm not hearing a motion to approve anything, so we'll just leave it at that. More information to be coming. Is there any new business? We will not be going into executive session at this time pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2, and there being no further business, I declare the meeting adjourned, and we'll take a